this is also from their climate signal, so in 2021, and I find this a very interesting picture as well, where they map the average temperature actually in the Netherlands, and they made it into a barcode actually. So what we see, well, we have the claims data, of course, of our sector. So I will explain this and also translate it a bit. I think for now, the on the left top corner is the most interesting one. The general damage of weather actually in the Netherlands caused by weather in millions of euros. And what you can see there is these spikes that are of course very or these rapid increases that are very visible. So you can clearly see in 2016 we had a big hailstorm. In 2018 a big storm as well in the winter. In 2021 the floods in the province of Limburg. And also the last one in 2022 there was some storms as well in the winter in February actually that caused a lot of damage. I mean not all of these weather events can be linked to climate change, and also of course value increases in the Netherlands in general, so you would assume that also the damage then increases. But what we do see is that these events have enormous impacts compared to a normal year. So this year, for instance, there were not many extreme weather events in the Netherlands. I mean, in Europe there was definitely a lot of events, of course, but so we expect that for this year it will be lower again. So that therefore we can also we don't have as many data points that we can see a trend or so, but we can like make this clear and visible. And I think that's also our role as insurers, to also add to this awareness and to show like, okay, what do we already see? And within Europe, I think there was a report where they could see a trend actually in increasing damage due to extreme weather. And therefore, like, insurers are also looking for more understanding, and we also work with IVM, KNMI, but also some other partners. And this, I think, like, yeah, on like early warning, it's an important part for insurers to prevent damage. So KNMI is also working on an early warning center, where we take part in it as well, to be able to not only show warnings but also add coping appraisal. So what can people do actually to mitigate damage and to decrease damage. And also we're working with the Dutch Green Building Council actually on how to make like buildings more climate adaptive. They're developing a framework currently where they can they give like you can have like a score for the surroundings and also per building, and also they can tie like measures to it, so how to decrease that. And currently there are ongoing talks also on whether it would be interesting to have a climate label. Like in the Netherlands we have an energy label as well for houses. But to add a climate label would also add in a simple, clear way what the climate risk is of a certain building. Obviously, it's difficult because this will do something with the value of houses, of course. So there are also some banks, for instance, who might be less happy with the climate label. But what you could say is that the decrease in the price, then you could maybe invest into making your house more climate adaptive, to increase again in those kind of labels. So also the Dutch Ministry of Infrastructure and Water is currently looking at to research a water label in the Netherlands for houses. And this could also be part, of course, of what insurers can do. Really warn about uninsurability. Well, that's not the case in the Netherlands and other countries. It's more of a topic, of course, like Australia or certain parts of the US. This is currently not what we're doing yet, because in the Netherlands generally with the Delta program and the dikes, the flood defenses, we're very well protected. But this, of course, is insurers have the knowledge of the risk, and could also be part of sharing that. But this is currently not something we are doing. What we are doing though is focusing on spatial planning. So this is a very new topic for us. What Helen said before, like when insurers can nowadays, insurers are usually at the end of when there is a house being built. At the end, we're going to look at, okay, how can we insure it, and then the insurers will look and say either we can insure it for this premium or we can't insure it. Well, it would be interesting if insurers could be part, like in an earlier process, to see like, okay, how can we like add like preventive measures to insure it. There are quite some houses being built extra in low-lying areas in the Netherlands, as you can see, like in the west, for instance. And also, for instance, in unbanked areas, which is not insurable for households currently. And if you're building, I think I heard that in Rotterdam they want to build like about 17,000 houses extra in unbanked areas. Well, insurers have an opinion about that, and how can you bring these parties together, perhaps through climate adaptation as well. And now I'm going more towards actually nature-based solutions. There was a flood in Valkenburg in Limburg in 2021, which we saw in the climate damage monitor I showed you before. And what you saw there is that the repair was often done in the same way. So there was a wooden floor, and there would be like a new wooden floor there. What we saw this year was that this Valkenburg area flooded again. People have like similar damage. And this is because of indemnity in insurance. So of course you cannot get better from the next situation. Like otherwise there would be an incentive for fraud. But in climate adaptation, it's actually very strange to not do this then in a climate adaptive way, to be able to add that to the building back better. So we're currently looking at that. How to do that. Insurance companies are advising for now on climate adaptation, but that's sometimes not enough. So we're also looking at, okay, what are examples that are interesting to adopt. I think in the UK you have flood re, for instance, which might be interesting, and there are some other examples in other countries that might be interesting to prevent building back in the same way and having similar damages over time again and again and again. Examples of current, there's actually more like collaboration, and there's some examples of actually execution more of NBIS. Collaboration, there are two, like Klaverblad Insurance that's partnered up with NK Tegelwippen, so it's more like where they nudge people to get rid of the tiles in their garden, for instance, and make it more green. Klaverblad, this insurance company, saw their role as well as make these gardens more green. Nationale Nederland and other big insurance companies partnered up with the Green Village, for instance, to look at, okay, what are preventive measures to add and to support to decrease damage. More clear examples are, of course, the one from Interpolis that Helen already discussed, and also ASR is also adding it actually more to their advice. So every time there is a flood, something they say, okay, you can do this and this and this, but you could also do it in a climate adaptive way. Get rid of the wooden floor, for instance, and install like a tile floor or those kind of things to mitigate damage. But that's not enough, so that's why we're also working in a working group currently on climate adaptation under the Dutch Central Bank, on the platform of sustainable finance. And this November we have some, we will present this report. There are some recommendations that we're currently writing, and this is still under construction, but I did want to share it already with you because I think it's interesting to also discuss. So this is for the whole financial sector, so also banks are included, and I think this is also something that you cannot only see as an insurance thing, but you also need to see it as like important for banks as well, because sometimes it's not only insuring but also financing actually. So we want to create pilots in lower urban areas and in unbanked areas, for instance, to see what we can do there to increase insurability. And to governments, it's more like to create actually laws on this. So currently it's all guidelines, and for insurance companies guidelines are interesting, but if it comes to competition, yeah, then often of course the one with the lower price gets the customers. So then these guidelines are thrown away, or more or less are not taken into account as much as it would be if it were like laws. And on the investment side, link climate adaptation more to sustainability-linked bonds. This is also a recommendation we will probably add to this report. And lastly, these are what can insurers how can NBS be more common? I discussed this with this work group as well. What you see is that there is insurance companies are often the investment side and the underwriting side are often not really connected. So when there is a benefit on the one side and a cost on the other side, then that cost is mainly seen, and the benefit on prevention is not really seen. So for us, it's really like we connect these more, and because then you can see the benefit and not only the costs. Dare to invest and also take into account more like the common good. That's very difficult for competitive parties, of course, but for instance, when you would team up with others and minding competition rules, of course, because that's also a difficult one here. So you cannot, of course, say like, okay, we will do this as a whole sector. You cannot make these deals because that would be like a cartel and competition rules that would be there. And for government, actually, what I said before, these mandatory building codes that are very important actually for insurers, because then the whole market can move instead of some of them. So if you really want to have a change, then these like mandatory building codes are important to add climate adaptation in that. And for researchers, this is also, of course, one of the core of this project. But for us, it's really important to make like the benefits of NBS clear for financial institutions. So how much damage can it prevent, but also what can they do and what is the business case that is there. We discussed this briefly before, but I think this is very interesting also to look at. For instance, room for the river, like a big NBS. Like, okay, can you add, for instance, some interesting extras to it that it would be interesting for investors to invest it even more compared to it would just be room for the river, for instance. Is there something additional that you could add which makes it more interesting for them to invest in? I think this is also bridging your presentation later. So that's why I wanted to end with. Thank you.